That to this now, a dark story behind some glamorous vacation photos posted on Instagram by two young women showing their dream trip cruising around the world. Here they are in bikinis, drinking from coconuts in Tahiti, as John Scott promised us before the break, having fun frolicking on some Pacific beaches. But on day 51 of their 68-day cruise, Australian Border Force officers searched their cabin, searched the ship, and found $30 million worth of cocaine in these suitcases that belonged to them. The women are charged with trying to smuggle the drugs into Australia. They face life in prison. Heather Hansen, trial attorney, Brian Claypool, criminal defense attorney. I'm sure both of you have completely clean luggage when you travel, so great to have you. Brian, you say these young women might have a good argument to get lesser charges. How so?
I've got a 4-word defense for them.
Oh, come on.
It ain't my bag.
Come on. It has their name on it.
Heather, okay, let's start with this, Jenna. This trip began in London. You really think that these two young ladies could walk through a London airport with that much cocaine in their bag? There's absolutely no way, given the global terrorism that we've been facing.
Wait a minute.
That's number one.
We don't
number
know
two,
it came from London, though. We don't know where the cocaine or when it was loaded on the ship.
But that's where the trip started, so they had to go through security to get it through. The only other way it could get on the boat is if they were at a port like in Colombia or Peru, and then somehow the luggage gets on the boat then.
Well, okay, so let's ask Heather. That brings up an interesting point. I mean, they are going to different ports all over the world. They're not in possession of their suitcases all the time. Maybe it's just a mistake.
Yeah, listen, I think that that's going to be a really tough defense. I think it is a potential defense, and they don't have a whole lot more. I think ultimately what's going to happen is these two women are likely going to turn against other members of what is probably a crime syndicate. To have this much cocaine, and it wasn't just them, there was also an older gentleman on this boat that also had a great deal of cocaine. To have this much cocaine, there has to be some sort of crime syndicate involved. The authorities are likely going to want to make a deal with these women in order to get the other members of that syndicate, and that might be their best way to avoid life in prison.
And we were showing the photos. It brings up an interesting question. Wow. Not only do you have the largest drug bust of its type on a cruise ship, that's why this is making headlines, but one of the other reasons, Brian, is you have all these social media posts of their vacation over the last several weeks. In general, how will the social media come into play, if at all, in this case?
I think the social media helps them, Jenna. I mean, these two young ladies look like they could be the next bachelorette as opposed to convicted felons. I mean, they're very beautiful. They're having fun on a trip. It doesn't lead somebody to believe that they could be involved in something this heinous. One other point I wanted to make, too, is the government has to prove, they have to prove these young ladies had knowledge that that cocaine was in that luggage. And federal authorities, Jenna, have already come out and said, we don't know where that cocaine came from or how it got on to the cruise ship. That's a real problem.
Yeah. Heather, you do have several different forces involved. I mean, you do have the Australian federal authorities, you have law enforcement in the States as well as Canada involved in this, so they must have something. But then you have all these pictures of them not doing drugs, obviously, not selling drugs on Instagram, and I wonder how that kind of comes into play when they're presenting their case.
Listen, I think a jury is not going to be real inclined. If there's evidence that supports the fact, and I think that there will be, that these drugs came on in Peru or one of the more South American countries where these drugs are more plentiful, I think that it actually is going to anger a jury to see that these young ladies are frolicking and enjoying the wealth of their riches that is made from drug money. I think that perhaps it could be used against them, and I think we're going to see this more and more often as these criminals are using social media to document the things that they're doing.
200 pounds of cocaine, worth over $22 million in their luggage, so it's not something minor. In the meantime, did anyone know that you can go on a cruise for like 2 months all around the world? I mean, this sounds great. I mean,
absolutely sounds great.
It sounds amazing. What an advertisement. Heather, Brian, great to have you both. We'll continue to watch this case. Thank you.
It does raise questions about how a 21-year-old pays for that kind of
I mean, it does. That's right. I don't have the answer to that.
Maybe daddy's wealthy. We'll see.
We'll see.